We knew that already, Gary.
Mm-hmm. See, so this was just all practice for the thing. All right, so Sharon, how has life at home been working for you?
Oh, it's good. I mean, I miss the office for sure. Yeah. It's been most of my career, actually. I worked as a bureau reporter, so it's kind of here. This was the USA Today bureau. Like, this is
Really?
it. Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So I'm back in that spot, but working with people and like being in an office and working with the team is actually a lot more fun than this. So I'm missing that a lot.
Yeah.
How is it going for you?
Part of the thing is it's what I would do would sit in a room, but it would be an office, and I would just write all day. And so from that point of view, it hasn't changed a whole living room and not in my office. And but the other part is that the drive programs all being gone is a huge difference. I mean, it's taken away a lot of interaction with people.
Well, the guy telling me just trying to do the road tests now has become a real ordeal. Sanitizing car between drivers and passengers, and so it takes the fun out of it.
I wonder if that'll change. They're starting to learn now that, based on the latest CDC stuff I've read, they don't think that this virus is transmitted that much from surfaces that people have touched.
Yeah, I think they've learned, not to get into it too much, but I think the U.S. authorities kind of missed the boat a little bit on the masks, because they're still saying, "Oh, you're not transmitting," but there's data out there, which is only intuitive, that at least a portion of what's coming at you gets caught as well with whatever kind of mask you have. And they underestimated. I guess they were worried because they didn't have enough masks on hand, but they could have recommended bandanas or whatever right from the giddy up. And hopefully people will learn. Although Memorial Day weekend, I saw a lot of idiots. I was up in the boonies, and everybody was really good. There's like no coronavirus there, 40 cases in the entire county. And all of a sudden, all the vacationers shot up there, and there wasn't a person wearing a mask.
Yeah. I noticed the same thing.
And then the day after, everybody's back to normal. Once they all left, then everything's fine again. So I feel very comfortable up there, but and it's beautiful. But now I'm down in Detroit.
I bought a couple of masks. My wife and I both bought a couple from the Detroit Institute of Arts. They haven't arrived yet. I'm dying for these. I mean, they got really cool artwork, and of course, being automotive, I had to get one with the Diego Rivera mural on it. It's got a close-up, not the whole thing. And then I got a Mondrian abstract as well.
Good.
That's cool.
My wife picks them out. So.
It's a way to help the Art Institute as well.
Yep.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, there'll be lots of things that are going to need a lot of help as we go forward in all of this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very unequal what's happening all over the place. So.
It's interesting, too. We had Debbie Dingle on one of the TV shows, and she was saying there's talk in Washington, still a lot of argument. Do you help the auto industry or not? But she says what it's starting to focus in on now is what's an American company? Because Congress is in no mood to help out companies that are not American. And I think this is going to hurt companies like Aptiv and Delphi that moved their headquarters to Dublin just so they didn't have to pay as much U.S. taxes. This could come back to haunt them.
Yeah. There's so many complexities. I don't think anybody's going to figure it out. There's going to be a lot of disparities all along the way. I didn't get a chance to read it, but Magna was talking about, these guys, everybody has to keep the cash register ringing now. That's a cash flow problem for these guys, big time. Mm-hmm. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, GM and Ford are now doing fast payments. They'll pay you up front, but they're doing it through a lender, and then the supplier has to pay a lender fee. And then, GM and Ford will still do their, 60-day payment to the lender afterwards. So, it gets cash right to the supplier, but it's costing them money because they've got to pay the fee.
Yeah.
Right? It's like
They
payday
did that.
loans.
They did
Yeah,
that
exactly
during the
right.
Great Recession too. But at least the interest rates should be relatively low. But I'm sure they're paying at least a point or something. So
Yeah.
you know, not good.
Okay, here we go. This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 511 for May 28th of 2020, the last Shelby Cobra. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires. Your journey, our passion.
Mr. Gary Vasilash, how's
John,
the
how are you?
quarantine going?
It's still going strong,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we'll all be better one day. So I have a very special guest today. So here's something that happened in history that is in some way relevant to him. That
Okay.
in 1928, Chrysler bought Dodge Brothers. So then 92 years ago, Chrysler buys Dodge Brothers. And so then I was thinking over the years, an interesting company to watch in terms of ownership, because in 1998, we had Daimler buying Chrysler. Then we had in 2007, Cerberus buying Chrysler. And then in 2011, Fiat came to town and finished the deal in 2014. And I think that perhaps at this time next year, we'll have a new entity entirely, which would be FCA PSA.
Yeah. Yeah. Geez. Unbelievable. What a history.
Exactly.
Well, we'll keep the audience's suspense just for a moment longer as to who our special guest is, but we got to bring our other journalist colleague in here. Sharon Carty, come on in.
Hi guys.
Hey,
How you
Sharon.
doing, Sharon?
Doing great. How about you?
Good. Hey, so I'm just curious. You've been at Car and Driver for how long now?
It's just over a year. I hit
Just
a year on April 8th.
Okay, so what do you think?
It's great. It's great. The team is just incredibly. I love working with smart people, and so it's a room full of smart people, which kind of keeps me on my toes, and also is just a ton of fun. Everybody's like, willing to try new things, and they've already got this great history of being innovative and creative, and it's a lot of fun. I'm just like I feel lucky every day that I get to be here.
Well,
And
you
I'm sure
should,
that-
Sharon. You got one of the best jobs in the business.
Yeah. I'm
I
sure
know.
everyone watching is very jealous of you right now.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I gotta say. I did a Zoom call with a third grade class in LA yesterday, and they first question was, "Why did you take this job?" And I was like, "Why? Why wouldn't I take this job?" It was, terrifying and challenging, and just also fantastic. So I feel really
Now,
lucky.
wait a minute. This was a third grade class. Are they back at school, or was this completely remotely?
Completely remote. They were all zooming in. We did this thing called boredom busters for kids, where we have like cars that you can cut out and make into paper cars. And so a friend of mine saw that I had done this and asked me if I would come in and talk to our class. And so they had all done their cars and then just asked a ton of questions about cars and being a woman in the industry. And I was actually pleasantly surprised that a fair number of them knew what it was to drive stick and had family members who drove stick. So it was a good chat with the 8-year-old.
There's hope for the world yet.
Exactly.
Hey, let's bring in our special guest, Chris Theodore.
There I
And
am.
there he is. All right,
There he
Chris.
is, Chris.
Hi guys.
Welcome back.
Hey,
Good to be
Chris,
back.
let's see. I know a little bit about your career. I watched you in a good chunk of it, but you were at Chrysler for a long time and at Ford for a long time. You have probably run more product development programs than anybody else I've met in the industry.
Well, there's been a bunch, and I guess I'm the only guy that's worked for Ford twice, Chrysler twice, American Motors, Carson Concepts, American Sunroof, John DeLorean.
Wow. Wait. John DeLorean. What'd you do with him?
That's funny. I just got a copy of a book. We started up a turbocharging company called Legend Industries. That was one of my forays into being an entrepreneur. But our two clients were Fiat and DeLorean. And so we did the Fiat Turbo, and then a year later, Fiat withdrew from the North American market. And we were doing a twin turbo DeLorean, and John did his drug deal, and that was the end of that. So I spent some time in Belfast. I got some good stories, but that's for another time.
You were into blowers, and he was into blow.
Oh my God! Ooh, you got the pun going. All right.
Yeah.
All right, Chris, tell us about some of the cars that you worked on over the years. I mean, it's a phenomenal list, and I think that people would be very surprised to hear some of them.
Well, I guess the first car was actually at the University of Michigan. We did our own urban vehicle, and it was part of a competition, and worked with, of course, one of my professors was Dave Cole, Ed Cole's son. And of course, Ed Cole was the head of General Motors back in the day. And so then I went to Ford, and I worked on Ford heavy trucks. We did turbine trucks and a truck over a cab over that was on an air suspension on the frame. We called it Easy Rider, sign of the times. At Chrysler, then I went to Detroit Diesel, worked on the first 4-stroke diesel at Detroit Diesel. As everybody knows, mostly were 2-strokes at the time. And then went to Chrysler, worked on a research safety vehicle, worked on the first minivans. And then I got sucked into the Fiat DeLorean turbocharging game, and did that for a couple of years. And when we went broke, went to work for Carson Concepts, and we did the Mustang, the reincarnation of the Mustang convertible, and the K-car convertibles, and all sorts of T-tops and that kind of stuff. On to American Motors, where we did the Grand Cherokee, the 4-liter Jeeps. And Chrysler bought American Motors, so I'm back working for Chrysler again, which was great. And we had a great time at Chrysler.
Hey, Chris, one sec. Wait, when you move, you're jostling your microphone.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm agreeing. I got to wave my hands. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll not wave my hands. But let's see. When we got back to Chrysler, then we were working on I was working on powertrain, then the new minivan, the second generation minivan, then small car. We'd worked on the Dodge V10, which kind of led to the Viper V10, but that was done separately, and that's part of the book that we're going to talk about. PT Cruiser, and then after the Daimler Chrysler merger, was off to Ford, and we did Ford GT, the 2005 Mustang, and a host of other products. So, and then after that, I had a bunch of other jobs after I retired. So it's been a long list of cars.
Before we get to the exotic things, I've got to ask you, does the success or the longevity of the minivan surprise you at all?
Not at all. In fact, I guess my motto back in the day was there should be a minivan in every garage. And if it weren't for emotions, there should be. It's like the most practical vehicle of all time. And so really what's going on in the world right now are all the CUVs, which was planned, but they're disguised almost minivans, pretending to be sport utilities because of a pseudo upscale image. But yeah, the Chrysler minivans, we owned 70% of the market for, I think it was 15 years. It was just amazing. Everybody tried to out invent the minivan, and you remember the dust busters and that sort of thing. And we just kept refining and doing what the customer wanted, and really handled the market. And then the new Chrysler minivan, which I had nothing to do with, they've come back. That's really a really nice vehicle. Mm-hmm. And one of the best secrets on the market, is that their hybrid is really a bargain when you compare it to everybody else's electric or hybrid vehicle. So pretty neat, pretty neat. So lots of good stuff out there.
Yeah, that
Well-
resume is amazing.
It's
yeah, like I
fun.
said, one of the best in the business I've ever met. I mean, what a breadth of products that you've worked on, and some totally really iconic ones that are still going strong today.
Yeah, well, I never worked a day in my life. I was just playing and having fun. So, and I still am. So.
Well, Chris, tell us about this book that you've got, the Last Shelby American. In fact, you sent me the link before the show too. Jay Leno just did a segment on the car with you there.
That was a lot of fun. That was last November. The book came out. His guys saw the book and got a call, and they said, "Hey, bring the car out," which we did. And Donald Osborne did an evaluation on the car, and of course, then Jay and I went out on the road, did some filming for about an hour, and it was a riot. It was just a great thing to happen. And of course, I'd met Jay before. People probably don't remember it, but when we introduced the 2005 Ford GT, Jay actually auctioned off the first car at Christie's for us. So I was out there and got a $500,000 for the car. So that's when I first met Jay, and he's a great guy to great. What can I say? Leader for people and car interest of all ages in cars and keeping the passion alive. So it was a lot of fun to be out there with him.
Yeah, we got a picture of the car up right now. It's actually a concept car that you did, I think, with Jay Mays when he was running Ford Design. How the heck did you ever end up with a concept car? People just don't get concept cars. I mean, the legal departments don't want those things leaving the building and going into somebody's hands. How did you pull that one off?
Well, I never in my wildest dreams expected this to happen. I love that car. I mean, it was probably the most documented build of all time. People probably don't remember it, but we did from the beginning to end with Carroll Shelby. We did this car from sketches all the way to the introduction to the show, to him driving the car and doing donuts at Irwindale Speedway. It was all documented.
What? He must have been close to 90 at that point.
He was 80 at the time, yeah, and it was amazing. And it was a great video on a show called Rides, one of the first, reality TV shows, if you will, for automobiles anyway. And it became extremely popular for about 2 years. Anyway, I retired, and I loved this car because it was unusual for a concept car to be as well engineered as this one was, because we intended to put it in production after we did the 2005 Ford GT. And so the chassis was fully engineered. It has a bespoke, one of 4 in the world, V10 engines, and just a super car that we did with Carol. Loved the car. Couldn't get it sold. I'm retired. I'm flipping through the web. It's about 3 years ago now, and I see an article saying that Ford is putting the Shelby Cobra concept up for auction in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I go, this can't be right. It's lesser pushmobiles and stuff Ford is auctioned off. Why would they be auctioning this car? And so I dug into it a little bit. And to my surprise, Edsel Ford was trying to raise money for the restoration of the Fairlane Mansion in Dearborn. And so I suggested to Ford, hey, why don't we auction off one of the cars? And they did. They set up the auction. But then the lawyers, exactly as you mentioned, John, got involved and said, hey, you can't, you got to disable this car. Put cement in the cylinder liners. You can't be drivable. Well, some cooler heads prevailed, but they still disabled the car. They allowed the motor to run, but the car couldn't be driven. So I saw this and said, well, maybe I might be able to go to the auction and get it on the cheap. And so I conned my wife into saying, let's go visit brother and sister-in-law, Jason Vines, whom you know well, was living in North Carolina at the time. And we'll stop at the auction just to see what's going on. So we drove out there, and I certainly didn't get it on the cheap. In fact, it took off, and finally, I walked away, and my wife, doubled what I had said I was going to pay for it, and I walked away. But the guy followed me, and my wife said, "Hey, you only got one chance at this." So I mortgaged both houses, and we bought the car. Of course, I had all the blueprints and everything, and took it back to the same shop where we built the chassis in Livonia, and called Technosports, and we got the car running, and it runs great. And then to get it out on the road with Jay Leno, it's like a dream come true. Everything came back to, it gave me an ending to write the book, quite frankly. I'd always wanted to tell the stories about, Carroll Shelby, my childhood idol, and all the things, finally getting to meet him, and then helping to bring him over to Ford, and all the projects we did there. And after I retired, a lot of projects people never even knew about. But, I started the book, and then I stopped. And when I had the car, I said, now I've got an ending.
So Chris, two things. One is pull your thing forward, because we're still hearing a lot of scratching from your microphone. So if you could maybe hold it.
Okay. Here we go.
So we'll see. So let's see how this goes. But so here's my question before we talk about the car specifically. You said something very fascinating about how this car was going to go into production after the 2005 GT, but as you said, you couldn't get it sold. Explain what that means. I mean, how does something like that work within an organization?
Well, getting programs, getting the approval to spend the money to develop a vehicle is an arduous process. You have to put together a business case. They're huge investments when you're doing a car. We're talking billions here, not necessarily billions for a specialty car. Well, yeah, we're talking billions even for specialty cars. Let me go back and think about it. So you think about it. We did the Ford GT. I mean, we were lucky to be able to do that car, and that was basically a break-even proposition. And it was about $1.5 billion, and you've got to sell 4,500 cars just to break even. And if you think about it, the next thing was to reuse some of the parts, transaxles from the Ford GTs in the back on the Cobra and that sort of stuff, so we could start reusing and actually reduce the investment. But the market was starting to get a little soft, and it became harder and harder to sell the idea of doing that next car.
Yes.
And even if we'd gotten it approved, the Great Recession was coming, and it would have probably killed it before it would have been stillborn. So it's tough. If that explains it well enough, it's a tough business.
Definitely. What would you consider to be like the most successful car that you worked on?
I think that, well, there's probably two. I think the most successful was the second generation minivan. We added a lot of features, made it good looking, but also customer features. The fourth door was a revolution. It shouldn't be, but it's obvious these days. But the fourth door was a revolution. Roll-out seats, all these customer features that we built into the car, and we were building about 700,000 of those a year, and really had the market cornered. The other one I was pretty proud of working on was the PT Cruiser, because nobody in North America anyway, certainly at Chrysler, it was the only small car that ever made money. And we sold 1.2 million of them over the years, 1.3 million. And not only that, we built the car on a loophole that the government has still since closed.
It was a truck.
It was a truck, which allowed us to sell more Dodge Rams. So, because of fuel economy standards. And so it was a win-win proposition, both for the company and for the consumer. And it was an interesting thing, because at the time, it's a minivan, but we knew Chrysler had tried earlier to do a minivan. is called the Z-Body program. It ended up being the Mitsubishi, I can't remember, something. Chrysler gave it away because it clinicked so bad, because Americans didn't want a minivan. So the idea of the PT Cruiser was to develop a car that was cool on the outside, but it's like a candy flavored medicine. You know, it was good for you on the inside.
Yeah.
And it struck a chord and did really well. So I'm proud of that. Of course, I'm proud of 2005 Mustang was a great car, and Shelby's, and of course I love the Ford GT, and you love them all. It's all fun.
Hey, go back to the PT a minute, because the packaging of that car was brilliant. And I'm just curious why no one's tried to at least copy the packaging. I mean, you can body it with it or whatever you want, but that packaging inside, the seats, the room, the leg room, the H point, the cargo space, all that stuff was fantastic.
I think people have tried. There are other cars, but they just, in fact, there is one. The closest thing to a PT Cruiser now is actually the Kia Soul. In fact, I kind of think of it as the legacy, to the PT Cruiser. Obviously in a modern package, but the original intent of the PT Cruiser was, we went retro because you needed a different style. The amazing thing about that package is the car was designed to look like a rear-wheel drive, hot rod, and yet really it was a front-wheel drive car, which was an immense engineering challenge to get the short front overhangs. If you can imagine, normally you have the front rail, so the car goes straight out for impacts. To curve them like the hood of that car curves was an engineering challenge. A lot of little tricks that we had to do to get that car.
So, Chris, how did you feel when Brian Nesbitt left Chrysler and went over to GM and brought the HHR out?
Right.
I'm trying to remember if Brian left before me or after me, but of course we knew that was going to happen. Chris Lutz had gone to General Motors, and he took Brian with him, and so you knew that was going to happen because, Lutz was a big proponent of the PT Cruiser, and without Brian, we struggled. We knew what we wanted to do with PT Cruiser, but his sketch, and I've got his sketch hanging on the wall, and he sent me years later, he sent me a nice letter. He came up with the right answer. We were trying to go retro, but he gave it everything we worked on. Either the modern stuff didn't look right, and the retro stuff didn't look right. The retro stuff looked like a Volkswagen Bug with a Beetle kit, with the nose, 44 nose on it. Didn't look right. And then Brian did this one sketch, and we blew it up full size on the wall. We had a review with Bob Eaton and Bob Lutz and Tom Gale, and we're walking out, and nobody liked either clay model. We had the retro and we had the modern, and neither one looked right. And as we're walking out, we deliberately walked them past this blown up Nesbitt sketch, and everybody said, "That's it." And the rest is history. So fun project.
Well, I wrote about that car when they were ending the line when I was at USA Today. And I swear, I was just blown away by the radio reaction. I mean, people just absolutely love the PT Cruiser, even after it had, years after it just kind of become a rental fleet car. And, it was sort of, I really would wish that Chrysler had done something with it. I think there really was a demand there for it to be upgraded and kept modern.
I think it was kind of unloved afterwards, because the people that developed it were gone, and there was nobody left that really understood what we were trying to do. And so, it got one minor refresh, and that was about it. Because the thought was to bring it forward and modernize and continue on. And as we've all seen, CUVs, crossovers have flourished from that. And I guess I use the Kia Soul as the example of what PT Cruiser could have become as time went on.
Yeah,
Why did that make money?
Pardon me?
Why did it make money?
Basically because if you think about it, it's variable cost. I hope I'm not getting too technical for the non-industry people, but the cost to build a car was very little more than a Dodge Neon.
Because it was based on the Neon.
Because it was based on, well, there were a lot of differences, but based on the Neon, we had to change a lot of stuff. I got to tell you, to be honest, to get that flat floor in the rear and the short front overhangs. But the cost to build a car was basically probably less than $500 more than a Neon. But the price premium was $1,000 to $2,000 more. So you went from, negative margin to positive margin. So that's what we said. It's probably the only small car that made money. As I found out later, there were other compact cars on the market that actually cost more to build than a PT Cruiser. So it was a good business proposition as well as a market success.
So, Chris, let's go to your book, The
Okay.
Last Shelby Cobra. Why that title, and what prompted you to write the book?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Carroll was my one of my childhood heroes. As a car guy, Carroll did everything by the age of 40. He'd, been a fabulous race car driver, built a world-class race car that won, put his name on it, won at Le Mans for Ford as a team owner, and accomplished everything in his early 40s. So he was a hero when I was a kid growing up. I'm racing, slot cars, Cobras and Ford GTs. And then I finally got to meet my hero at Chrysler. Got called down. I was working on the Dodge Truck V10, and Bob Lutz and Francois Castaigne had been noodling around the idea of doing a modern Cobra. As you probably know, Bob Lutz had an Autocraft Cobra, and they said, we need to do something to spike up Chrysler's image. So I got the call, hey, go down, meet Carroll Shelby, show him what we're doing on the V10. Showed him the V10 and suggested, hey, we could probably do an aluminum block version of that for, a sports car. And of course, Tom Gale's people went off, did the beautiful design. The next thing I know, you had the show car, and we're off and running. And Carroll and I, we hit it off. He's such a neat guy and an interesting character, larger than life. And not all wonders. There's a few flaws here and there, but quite a character. And when I went to Ford, it just, I'd always been of the opinion that basically Chrysler, rightly so, Ford let its heritage lapse, so the Viper kind of ripped off the Cobra heritage. And when I got to Ford, and I'd wanted to do a mid-engine Viper, as did many other people, Francois Castaigne, but that didn't happen. So when I got to Ford, I said, hey, let's go back and we got to get our heritage back. And we need to get Carroll over to Ford, back to Ford where he belongs. Well, the book tells you that was not an easy proposition. For those that don't know it, Henry Ford II sent Edsel to go work for Carroll back in those days when the racing heyday. And Edsel actually went to Le Mans, was there when Ford won with the Ford GT. And it was almost like Carroll was a second father to Edsel Ford. But when Edsel came back from, when Carroll came back from his Africa thing, after he got done with winning everything, and then the emissions rules and safety and regulation, and they basically shut down the Shelby operation. He went off to Africa for 10 years. He comes back and finds all these replica Cobras being built and everything else. Well, Carroll said, hey, this is my stuff. People are copying it, selling it. And so he started to make sure and enforce his copyrights. And inadvertently, or advertently, depending on who you listen to, he ended up, Edsel had done he was marketing manager on the Mustang program. They did a special edition California car called the GT350. And the lawsuit for infringement of the copyright of the GT350 name came, and Edsel and Carroll fell on the outs and hadn't talked to each other for years. And many people they tried for many years to try and get them back together, and I name them all in the book. It's a long, convoluted story, but Keith Crane was involved, Coletti was involved, I was involved, but in the end, the deal actually got done by William Jeans, who was a neighbor of Edsel and also close to Carroll. And they kind of kissed and made up. Now, the rest of the organization still didn't understand it all. And it took a while still. Well, first, we got Carroll involved, being one of the member of the dream team to do the Ford GT. Then we did the Shelby Cobra concept to be a follow-on to that. That's really what, and I think some people didn't appreciate, even though it had been years and years before, how big the Shelby name is amongst enthusiasts. And we did the 2004 Cobra concept. We introduced it at Detroit. It was car of the show, and people went crazy. I couldn't believe it. Carroll was still late 70s then, and he was signing. Now he's actually in his 80s. He was signing autographs under these hot lights for hours on end. People, I mean, the who's who of Detroit lined up to get his autograph on the brochures at the black tie event at the auto show. So it was kind of wild.
Yeah, I remember that. That was fun to watch.
Yeah, and it was just super. And so then, the obvious thing when I got to Ford was we're going to do the new Mustang. You had to do a GT350 and you had to do a GT500. And it took us finally we got Carroll back into Ford and made the announcements, like I said. And it was still a long time. And I'll tell you the sales deal, it's in the book, but I was told, no, Carroll's old guard, we're not going to do a Shelby GT500. John Coletti was head of SVT, and I both said, you've got to do a GT, as did Jay Mays, got to do a Shelby GT500. And they said, nah, his name's not worth $200. Forget it. And so finally,
so that would have been $200 a car.
Yeah. And I pulled out it was in Business Week. There was some market research had been done amongst all age groups. And now I got name fade. Who was the Baywatch girl?
Pamela Anderson.
Pamela Anderson. Carroll Shelby tied with Pamela Anderson for name recognition for endorsing an automobile amongst all age groups. I mean, wow. Teens, 20-year-olds, tied. And losers were, I'm above every other name, Mario Andretti, all the other big names, in racing or anything else. So we finally got the idea sold of doing the Shelby.
You convinced him it was worth $200 a car.
Yeah, and it was but it was great that it happened, and then the rest is kind of history. I mean, it's all in the book. It's just
so Chris, give us a sense of timing here. So I mean, I think a lot of people may be familiar with Carroll Shelby working with Ford in terms of the original '66 GT car, and then they part ways, and he goes to Chrysler for how long was that?
I think Lee Iacocca got him to Chrysler around 1985, 86. They did the Shelby Daytonas and Omni GLH Goes Like Hell, which was a pretty cool car. And so they did those for a while. And then after Viper wound down and Iacocca retired, the arrangement between Chrysler and Carroll came to an end. In fact, he went off and he tried to do his own car, the Series 1, if you recall that.
So what was his contribution to the Viper?
He started out as being, an advisor. We had regular meetings, management meetings. And actually, that was when his heart started to go bad. And I'll tell you the best story comes up. So he actually had to disappear because he had a heart transplant for quite some time. When he came back, you may recall this, one of the Chrysler PR was in its heyday with all its stunts going on in those days. But one of the few public relations snafus was for the Indy 500, the pace car was going to be the Dodge Stealth, which was made in Japan. And the UAW got upset. A lot of Americans got upset that you can't have a Japanese car pace, Japanese built car pace, the Indy 500. So let's call the Viper team and said, hey, get 2 cars ready. They weren't even prototypes yet for the Indy 500. And Carroll was back from his heart attack, and they sent him down to Indy for a month with the Viper team. And he drove everybody around Indy for the month of May. I remember Steve Van Toon, who was editor for Motor Trend. This is just one of the stunts Carroll pulled, but he took Steve Van Toon out for, and he just laughed his ass all the way back to the set. So that was Carroll. It's hard to capture how funny and it was, but it was just, he terrified. Norman Schwarzkopf was in the vehicle as well, and it was just great. So he didn't have that much involvement with the Viper program, but that was certainly.
But at least you got a good story out of it.
Yeah,
got a great story out of it. Yeah.
Hey, we're going to have to take a quick commercial break. But Chris, stick around for the rest of the show. We're going to get into some of the industry news. I know Gary's got a bunch of topics we got to get into. I think we'd love to get some of your viewpoints of what's going on these days, too. Can you stick around?
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. We're going to take a quick commercial break and give a shout out to our good friends at Bridgestone. All right, we're back talking all things automotive with Chris Theodore and Sharon Carty, and of course me and Gary. But Gary, I know you got a number of topics you thought that we ought to be touching on in this show.
Absolutely. But first, although we don't have an official number, a number did come to mind that is very topical. So I think that you guys will be able to guess this. Okay. So Chris, Sharon, I'm going to give a number, and I want you to tell me what that number might represent. This is 152 million miles and change. Very topical.
Is that the reduction in commuting miles since the coronavirus started?
It's a good one, but no.
No.
I say mileage of people traveling over the Memorial Day weekend.
Good one, but no. John?
Okay, you said very topical. So I'm thinking the SpaceX rocket.
There you go,
That's
yeah.
how far it's going
Wow.
to travel.
Boy, you are so close, but only about 100. Only about 150 million miles off. So as you guys may remember, in February, they sent up the Falcon Heavy with the Tesla Roadster on it. And
Oh, yeah.
that is how far away it is from us right now.
Wow.
So you got to get Elon Musk on the show somehow, right?
That's right.
So this is sort of a slight, we've never really talked about this, but Tesla offers insurance to its drivers, and it's saying that because we know where they're at and how they're being driven, we can get a better deal. And I was reading in TechCrunch that apparently Rivian is hiring someone to do insurance. So what do you think that's all about? Do you think that Rivian will get into the insurance business the way Tesla's doing it?
Go ahead, Sharon. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. I think one of the struggles for the automakers that I talk about a lot when in referring to like autonomous cars is that I think a lot of automakers now are like looking for ways to have recurring revenue streams. It's just hard to sell a car and like just have it be gone and like that's it. Like you make money that one time and then it's gone. So I think, that kind of falls into that bucket of like why the automakers are looking at car sharing services and why autonomous makes sense, because then you like lease out that car and you lease out the autonomy service, and insurance definitely falls into that, right? Like you continue dealing with the customer and you continue getting money from the customer. So yeah, makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, John?
Yeah, look, I mean, as you're able to track what cars do as an automaker and know how they're driven, you can specify insurance rates specifically for that driver. Whereas any insurance company has to sort of average things out for all the claims people that they've got, or not claims people, the paying members that they've got. And so what Tesla's arguing is that, hey, we can probably offer you a much lower rate than what you're going to get from an insurance company. And they will not lose their shirt on it because they're using, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology here, but actuarial tables that are specific to a driver. And if Rivian is able to monitor its vehicles the same way, sure, why wouldn't it want to do that? It's exactly to Sharon's point. How do you get more of an ongoing revenue stream with this vehicle that you've made?
One of the things that I was wondering about is that, remember when Rivian was going to be like the adventure supplier that you would get one of his vehicles and it would set something up that you go off into the woods and go camping and whatnot? That all seems to have gone by the wayside. And I'm just wondering, well, maybe they're, getting some insurance so you don't get eaten by a bear or something when you're on one.
But Chris, maybe you can talk to this. You've been an entrepreneur. You know damn well business plans mean nothing once you start your business. You go for the money. And if a Rivian, their original plan, they had to sell something to the investment community to get something coming in, right? They had this whole plan. They were, like Gary said, they're going to be the equipment outfitters. But hey, it's like in a military campaign. Once the battle starts, you got to adjust to what's going on in the field.
What's kind of funny to me, I'm going to step back for a second, is the industry, management in the industry tends to act like lemmings. When one guy goes one way, they all follow. And they've done this for years and years and years. So the insurance, I think, is a great example. And so people are going to follow. And that doesn't mean just Rivian. I'm sure the auto manufacturers are taking a look at this too. And there's a certain echo to this. We always talked about getting the value chain. That was going on back in the Jack Nasser days. Remember that? And before that, when I start with the original lemming, I go back to when everybody thought in the auto industry the great thing to do was to decentralize, or not decentralize, but become a conglomerate. So own a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And everybody started buying up different companies. And that didn't work except for supposedly General Electric. They keep following these trends. Oh, ride sharing, big thing. Okay, so everybody jumps into ride sharing. Now that doesn't work. Oh, now we're closing up the ride sharing chapter. Oh, electric scooters. Everybody's going to have electric scooters. Oh, they're all over the neighborhood. They spend more money trying to find the scooters and repair them than they're getting in revenue. So, everybody's going to follow a model. I wish people did a little more thinking first before they decided which ones to follow and test the revenue stream. But like you said, John, sometimes the business models, you have to try. Let's think a little bit first, make sure you pick the best business models to go after. And I'm not saying insurance is a bad one, because I can see a lot of advantages to going the insurance route as well. Think about it with parts, supply, service, you could offer a better value chain than for a customer that gets into an accident or so on. So let's see how this works out. If it's successful, everybody's going to do it. And if not, then some of the lemmings will die off.
They'll go over the cliff, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, well, it only makes sense until you have like a really big accident, right? That you got to cover.
Right.
With really big liability.
Well, but you got all the repair part business yourself, so that might
that brings up
some of that.
that makes up another point. I don't know how. I'm just brainstorming right now, but if you think about it for a second, I don't see a whole lot of lawsuits, big time class action suits against automotive insurance companies. At least they haven't struck my radar. But all of a sudden, think about class action suits against car manufacturer ABCs insuring all these cars. I wonder if they might not become bigger targets than the insurance companies. So, like I said, you got to think these things through. But that's the first thing that just popped. I'm looking for a negative. That's the first one that just.
That's a pretty big negative right there. What else you got, Gary?
So we were, I don't remember if this was before the show or during the show. It must have been before the show. And we were talking about the payments from OEMs to the suppliers. And so the French government actually is got an 8.8 billion euro program, part of which it is buying distressed suppliers and putting them together. But another aspect of this, which sort of ties into this Rivian Tesla discussion, is the fact that they're going to be incentivizing people to buy electric vehicles to the tune of 7,000 euro if you buy one. What do you guys think? Is that a good strategy to increase the purchase of EVs?
Well,
Sharon, why don't you tackle that first?
I mean, yes. I mean, yes, it is, because I think from what I can see from the buying data that we see of people who are coming to the website now shopping for cars, everybody's very deal focused. You know, there's a lot of very intense focus on incentives and rebates and the sort of things that you can get back. And I haven't really looked at the European market, but I can imagine that they're in similar positions than we are. So if you can get a good deal on an EV right now, I think that might actually work. Maybe not to like get EVs to the point where they're, you know, a robust part of the market, but it might save them from kind of collapsing, because gas prices are down, the economy is down. You know, nobody really wants to spend the extra on that whole like EV system. And so, yeah, I think it could work to stabilize that market.
Mm-hmm.
That's my thought.
Chris, what do you think of EVs?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, we know here in the U.S. that we were giving $7,500 away. We know that worked, and it helped stimulate the market. I think about it, I saw the French plan as well. And yes, if you think in these times, I mean, manufacturers cannot make a profit on EVs by selling them at parity to gas engine vehicles. The only way you get to parity is by them being incentivized so that the manufacturers can, and they're still not making money on them, but at least they're not losing as much money because they can charge a higher price and then it gets incentivized down to parity. So if it were drying up now in the middle of a recession that's going to be going on in Europe, yes, it's going to stimulate sales. If I'm in France, you know, my bigger concern is the infrastructure there. I mean, you can't have a bunch of electric cords hanging out of all the apartments in Paris. So there's a lot of infrastructure work that has to be done. And their part of their plan does include infrastructure as well, but it's a big, big deal. And infrastructure is probably going to be one of the limiting factors as time goes on, because electric vehicles are going to become, battery costs are continuing to come down. And so it's sooner or later we'll approach price parity, but then you've got to have the infrastructure in place. And there'll still be, you know, it's going to be a long time before EVs really take over 50% of the market or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I understand the plan, but you know, it's just like everything else. You're spending your tax dollars to try and move an industry along.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of electric cords in Paris, we heard the Renault-Nissan Mitsubishi alliance is making some huge cuts. And Chris, this sort of goes to your point when you're talking about the cost of developing a vehicle. So apparently their plan is to basically cut the number of platforms that they have in half. So they basically go down to 4. And then sell these, throughout the entire system. What does this do in terms of allowing a company to, I don't want to say necessarily make money, but not lose money?
Well, it depends on the revenue you get when you do it. Actually, reducing platforms is what a friend of mine that I used to work with called a hardy perennial. Those plans come back every year, year after year. I've been in this business for 50 years, and we've been talking about, and we do reduce platforms, and they're getting much smarter about commonality. And electric vehicles actually also lend themselves to that as well. So that's going to happen. The question is, how do you differentiate? How do you get enhanced revenue? But yes, there are huge cost savings, and they got to do it. They really do have to do it, because unfortunately, I fast forward, John and I have talked about this, to 2050. If in fact, and autonomous is not coming as soon as we think, and electrification is not coming as soon as everybody thinks, but it's going to happen. And when it does, and all cars are not crashing and all traveling at the same speed, and differentiating automobiles is going to become a very difficult thing to do. It's basically going to become, at best, a fashion industry, for just style and perhaps comfort and convenience inside. And underneath, they're all going to be, as I told John, once they stop crashing into each other, you're going to have little Tupperware boxes sitting on skateboard platforms, and that's what you're going to be driving around in. So that's a long ways off. I think a lot of people have a hard time envisioning it, including the designers, because if you think about it, I guess I'm wandering off a little bit, but if you think about it, every autonomous vehicle you see, the sketches, they're all little boxes running around on the DVD wheels, and they're modern, contemporary looking, but they're not the automobiles that we used to lust after years ago. Maybe they will be like the iPhones for a while, but sooner or later someone's going to have to differentiate them too. Anyway, I got off the topic of platform sharing. You got to reduce them. You got to commodize. You got to get economies at scale. You got to do it smart so you can do really different vehicles. You can't fool a customer. It has to do what it promises it's going to do, at least visually. So we'll see how they do.
Yeah, Gary, I think this plan will hold as long as times are bad. I dare say, if you go back 20 years ago when Renault first got Nissan and you looked at what their plan was going to be, it said, we're going to reduce platforms. We're going to have more commonality. We're going to split R&D costs, blah, 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 blah. A few details different than what they're saying right now, but conceptually the same. And we see this happen every time. When times are bad, companies get very, very focused. They know exactly what to do because they don't have money to do frivolous stuff. As soon as times get good, somebody will come and go, I know we should be sharing everything, but we could do this little variant for this market here. And I see an opportunity for us. And they go, yeah, here's the money. And it all starts to spread out to where, we've seen car companies wake up to the fact I remember, I think it was Ford said, we've got 7 different kinds of cigarette lighters in cars. Nissan said we have 42 different steering wheels. So when times are good, they let everything get out of control. When times get bad, boy, do they get focused. And that's what we're seeing right now in the so-called alliance. We'll see how much discipline they have.
So speaking of money not being an object, so we heard this week that McLaren automobile is going to cut 1,200 people, and those things. Sharon, how much do they cost? They cost an enormous
$110,000. That's the last one I drove.
Yeah, so 1,000 here, 1,000 there, it doesn't matter. So they're cutting people, and then we heard this week that Andy Palmer lost his position at in a brain freeze, Aston Martin.
Aston Martin, yeah.
So even the luxury companies seem to be having a problem. Do you have any insight to that, Chris? What's going on in that space?
Well, yeah, it's it never was. I mean, other than Ferrari, it's a really, really tough business. And Ferrari makes a lot of money. And McLaren has been making great headway into that market, and Aston Martin under Andy Palmer was trying. But then when you hit one of these crises, I mean, you start hemorrhaging cash real quick. And the other thing that happens is when the markets change, it can be devastating for those small marques as well. And on top of that, personally, and here's, guys involved in Ford GT. I mean, I love cars, but I've actually become bored with all these supercars.
I'm totally with you on that, Chris. I'm sick of hypercars.
It's just they're all little wedge-shaped things that run down the road with a little doodad here or there. And they go beyond the capabilities of what anybody can drive anyway on a public road. They don't differentiate themselves. So I think that market's going to get tough. And so now you saw Aston was probably the sad part for Andy Palmer is, well, the SUV didn't come out soon enough for Aston Martin. And, Ferrari has been able to hold off on doing an SUV just because of the strength of the market and building some very good cars. But we'll see what happens. It's tough. The margins are not that good other than Ferrari. I was amazed McLaren did as well as they did. And Aston has never made money. I mean, I was part of a group that was thinking about buying Aston back in the day, and it sold for more money than it was worth. And then it sucked more money out of the investors that bought it. And it's exchanged hands probably 3 or 4 times in the last 15, 20 years. So tough business.
Yeah, I think it's especially tough because the nature of this crisis is so global, right? Like, generally you have a slowdown. It's a couple of regions, it could be North America and Europe, but China is still booming. And, now it's just everywhere. And so there's no place really for these luxury automakers to hide. And one of the things that's unique about Aston too is, and I don't know if this is true for McLaren or not, but a lot of their customer base is people who are using these as corporate cars. And so they come in through a corporation, and any corporation that is now leasing an Aston Martin for their executive, that's not passing any sort of board muster right now. That's not happening.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by what you said about supercars or hypercars because, look, I love cars. I love high performance cars, but there's so many of these supercar, hypercars coming out right now. To your point, Chris, they're not differentiating themselves enough. And I'll be honest, I think Ferrari is coasting on its laurels right now.
Absolutely.
To me, the latest lineup of Ferraris look like caricatures of Ferraris. They're not setting a new bar. And, we're on the verge of, even though electrification, I'm with you on that, is going to take longer than possible. We all know it's the future. Yeah. Aston just spent a boatload of money developing its own piston engine. Same thing happened at Jaguar Land Rover. I mean, the decisions when they made it seemed smart, intelligent. Now, a few years later, it looks like they just flushed that money down the drain. And I don't know what's going to happen to all these vehicles because there's just so many competitors and more coming out. And now you're starting to see the electric hypercars come out. And I think this whole segment's headed for disaster.
Well, again, I'll go back to the long-range story. You're not going to be able to drive them on public roads anyway. By 2050, I am projecting, I have been for 10 years now, that some countries are going to ban human beings from driving cars on public roads. So what good is having a hypercar other than at your hypercar farm or horse farm and, have the cars scare the bejesus out of you, taking you around the course like an amusement ride. So that's going to be a very limited market for the uber wealthy, just like racehorses are.
All right, so let me ask a question, and this is for both Sharon and Chris. Hypercars aside, looking to 2021, let's look that far ahead. Is there going to be an affordability problem in the industry that is going to have a major effect in terms of the recovery?
Well, there already is. I think, the price of new cars, the average price of new cars jumped from like $34,000, I think in October, to $37,000 in January. That's just not sustainable. It's just not sustainable for the long term. You've got a lot of people out of work right now, and those people who are not out of work are very anxious about their jobs and whether or not they're going to have jobs for a while. And I don't know any automaker really that is very well positioned to lower prices. I mean, even Hyundai, which has been, great value for the money, just 6 months ago, I was having probably about a year ago, I was having a conversation with someone over there, and they were talking about how they just want to start going more upscale because they've got this appetite, and they have found that they can keep pushing prices higher, and their customers will keep buying. And I think it was one of those things. I think that the industry is going to be caught pretty flat-foot on new car prices right now.
Yeah, I can't. I haven't thought this one through a whole lot, but it's kind of interesting right now. Prices have been going up to this point in time. I mean, I'm surprised people don't lease more, because the lease deals out there are ridiculous. And you can lease a decent automobile on a 2-year lease, 10,000 miles, for $175. I mean, people are paying more for their phones, than leasing. I mean, it's hard to understand the numbers when you put them together. I mean, think about it. But that's all based on the residual values of these higher and higher priced cars. When the slope starts going the other way, if I recall correctly from history, then the lease deals turn upside down. Now, like I said, I haven't thought this one through, but I seem to, in my memory banks from the industry, I think I've seen this movie before, and it's going to be difficult. And then everybody's going to say, what happened to the low priced cars? Oh, we got out of that business. So it's going to be, it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be a long slog, and it's going to be tough in Europe for sure. And it's clearly going to be tough here in the States, because a lot of people are really getting hurt by this. That we're going to have a hard time sticking it out. So we'll see how it comes back.
So do you think, John, V shape, swoosh shape, W shape?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about this last week. My opinion, we're going to see a V shape, a sharp V, but it's only going to come back to, I'll say, 70 to 80% of what it was before, because the people who buy new cars are in upper level incomes. The average household that buys a new car is over $100,000. They're not going to be as impacted as much in this. And so I think it'll be a V, but it's going to be a V that comes up short from a big time short from where it was before.
All right, last topic. So racing has been under, you were mentioning the Indianapolis 500 before. So racing's been under a lot of pressure, and they've come up with clever ways of doing this. Now, of course, we've seen that NASCAR has come back with no butts in the seats, and IndyCar is going to be starting up doing the same thing. But, in the meantime, there have been a lot of simulated racing. So this sort of goes full circle if you're talking about Rivian and Tesla. So Formula E, the electric Formula One car racing. And so they had something that was called the Race at Home Challenge. And as part of this, they had their Formula E drivers ostensibly driving these simulated cars, and a 27-year-old driver who drove for the Audi team, 27 years old, so I think his reflexes are probably pretty good. He decided that he would have an 18-year-old sit in for him and race. And it was discovered because in the earlier races, he wasn't doing so well. And in this last race, he rose way high, and then he got busted for that. So what do you guys think of the simulated racing? I just think it's crazy. I think that you'd get a gamer and it would do better, and this proves the point that it isn't necessarily somebody who can go and actually drive a vehicle do really well. Chris, what do you think?
I'd have to agree. I wouldn't. Hell, I started doing some of that myself. You know, I was trying to get my kids interested in cars. So when they're, we were the early programs that we could race the cars, and the kids could beat me. So I'm not surprised at all that the gamers are going to be better at the games than the car drivers. And I don't think it matters how good the simulations get. You can't, even with the fantastic simulators that the big race teams have now, like Ford's got down in the Carolinas, it's not the same. It's not the same. So these virtual races, leave those to the gamers. It's probably fun to watch. I haven't watched them. Hopefully this will all get over, because I even, what was it that I was? Oh, the golf match that they had the other day. I was watching that, and everybody said how great it was. And I said, something's wrong. And honestly, you realize without the crowd standing around, the golf course, it just didn't play. It just wasn't. You didn't hear the groan when the putt got missed, And now they're talking about piping some of this stuff in. Maybe they'll
laugh track,
or crash sounds or whatever else. But no, it's not the same. It's not the same.
What's your take on simulated racing, Sharon?
Well, I think I have teenagers, and I've been amazed at how, even since they were little, they would sit there and watch each other play video games, which, I grew up playing video games, and I never wanted to sit there and watch somebody else play them. But I think they're better now. They're more like realistic. They're more like a TV show. And so for an industry, a variety of industries, the auto industry and the racing industry, it's really struggled to connect with younger racers on that level. I think it's fantastic. I think it's forced the industry to innovate and try and come up with new things. And, I think that they should stick with this kind of thing longer. But it's a different skill, right? It's a different skill set. You don't get the same feeling in a racing simulator that you get when you're not a full racing simulator is different from the get-ups that you have at home. But, in the car and driver office, we have a racing chair and we have a wheel. And even still, you just don't get, any G-forces on anything. You don't get any resistance. It's very hard to keep the car going. So it's a different skill set. I get what happened though with that Formula E racer. I think I think it's terrible. I think that maybe they came down too hard on him, but they pay these folks a lot of money, and it's tough to be kind of faking things. There's a couple of these scandals have happened over the last couple months, right? I forget the name of the racer who dropped a racial slur in the middle of the race, and
Kyle Larson.
Yeah. And then another guy just dropped out of a race in the middle of it, kind of having a temper tantrum. These are jobs, and these people have to act.
It was AJ Foyt. Well, he used to get out of hammering out of the car.
Right. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. I think that is, I think it's a great experimentation. I think they should keep it up, but I think they're going to need to figure it out. You just can't take somebody who is doing an X job. Every industry does this, right? You take somebody who's really good at one thing and you shove them into a different job, and you're like, why aren't you good at this now too? It's got to be a different thing. You got to, bring up gamers who are good at it and build that, because it's different from the race car drivers.
Right. Didn't Infiniti have a program where they were actually taking gamers, and the ones who were really good, then they put them into a driving academy to teach them how to really drive, and then the one who raised to the top there got a
yep.
I think it was a Formula One ride?
Yeah. No, I think that's good, because I think there's less ego. I don't think the gamers think that they can be car race, right? I think they have some of the skills, and then they know that they need to learn more. But I think the opposite is true, right? The race car drivers just think they should be able to sit down at the computer and just do this because they do it, and there's really not that much room for, learning. And
Mhm.
they don't have that learning mindset. So,
Right.
oh, I hope they keep it up.
Mhm.
I think it's the right move.
I'm not going to
So-
watch. Sorry.
All right.
I want to see the real thing.
Mhm.
It's not for you and me, Chris. It's for like our 15-year-olds.
No, Chris, I'm like you. I want to see the real thing. I think, well, I don't think. We know why we're watching all this e-racing, sim racing, iRacing, as it's called, is because the real thing has been shut down until very recently NASCAR got going again. And I think a lot of us who were not familiar with the gaming in racing, like me, were astonished at the realism of it. And when you would see the camera on the drivers in their homes driving, I mean, they were intent. They were focused. They were involved. But it's not the same as the real thing. And you can tell, even though it's not the real thing, how involved they were by these things that we were just talking about. You know, Kyle Larson getting fired for using the N-word. Bubba Wallace getting so angry he just quits the race. This guy, Daniel App, you know, sneaking in a professional sim racer, 18-year-old. And, you know, now in a couple of weeks, they're going to do the 24 hours of Le Mans simulated. So you get 4 drivers. They're going to be doing multiple hour stints throughout 24 hours. Why are they doing it? Number one, I think, is they're competitors. They want to compete, even if it's sitting in a chair in their living room. Secondly, I think the sponsors like the kind of exposure that they're getting. The first NASCAR sim races got pretty good viewership. I mean, it was over 1 million people that were watching. For sponsors, that's eyeballs, that's gold. And that's why we're seeing that sort of thing. I think sim racing just got a whole lot more interesting to people. But I think the hardcore racing fan like me can't wait for the real thing to get going. And look at NASCAR's ratings when it did get back to the real thing. They had over 6 million, at times peaking close to 7 million viewers watching that thing. So it shows people are hungry to get back to the real thing.
Well, I think there's 2 things. There's probably something generational with this sim thing, because I don't enjoy all these simulated movies and everything else. And if you think about sim racing, it's going to be the same thing. You're watching a simulated movie where either you put in the plot of a wheel falling off or somebody spilling gas or something, or you know, it's just so artificial that I can't relate to it, but these kids can. You know, they love all these action movies that just are laughable to me. I laugh out loud in the theater when I have to drag my kids drag me to them and watch, you know, these superhuman feats that defy all physics. And the same thing's going to happen with the sim racing.
Oh, come on, Chris. I could see your eyes light up when John said there's going to be 24-hour Le Mans. You were thinking, can I possibly get enough Red Bull in time to be able to watch the whole thing?
You know, Le Mans is like the greatest race of all time. You know, I went to Indy for years and years and years and loved Indy. But when you go to Le Mans, you're in the pits and you feel the exhaustion and to see all the weird things that happen. I just can't. You'd have to make up a phony plot or put random actions into the race that people didn't expect to get 1/100th of the feeling of. I mean, when you're on the Le Mans, when you go on the back straight and you sneak through the woods and you watch the cars scream past you in the middle of the night at 200 miles an hour. I mean, and the wind that rushes past you. That's watching a race. It's not the same on TV screen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm reminiscing now.
But those are good reminiscences. I think that's a word.
Yeah.
But with that, we should probably wrap up the show. So, Chris Theodore, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great to have you. And like I said, you've developed more cars in this industry than anybody else I've personally met.
I don't know about that, but it's been fun.
Yeah. And Sharon Carty, great having you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was good seeing you again, Chris.
Good seeing you too.
And Gary, we'll keep on keeping on.
Okay, great.
Well, good.
Stay
Thanks
safe,
for watching,
everyone.
everybody. We'll see you next week.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires. Your journey, our passion.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.